I work with hundreds of finance teams that use QuickBooks for their purchasing and AP processes. And the same pattern keeps showing up. It's a great accounting system, but most companies fail to use it at scale, right, when it comes to either purchasing and AP. And if you're running your process through QuickBooks today and you're a growing company, you're probably already seeing some of these signs. People are not able to use it for creating purchase orders. Your team is, doing most of these processes outside QuickBooks, like getting approvals, emails, and so on. And your AP team is busy chasing invoice approvals. So if you are using QuickBooks and looking to scale your operation, in this video, I'm going to break down exact step-by-step process on what you need to do and how do you select a best procurement software that you can use with QuickBooks that allows you to scale your purchasing and AP process without replacing QuickBooks. So let's look at why QuickBooks isn't enough. Now, if you're using QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop for your purchasing process, you would notice that it's designed to handle procurement, which is like creating purchase orders, maybe like 1 to 10 purchase orders a month. And beyond that, it fails to scale. And the main reason for that is it's first and foremost an accounting system. It's not a procurement system. So it's not designed to handle all the things that you need at scale when it comes to either procurement or AP, which means it's designed for accountants, not for end users. So when you start looking at some of these challenges of the science, right, we start seeing it in few places. So the first place you're going to see this is access control. So QuickBooks is designed to basically have accountants work on the books. Now, all of a sudden, if you give access to other stakeholders, let's say your end users who are going to create these purchase orders in the system, they can actually do many other things other than just purchase orders. They can see your books. They might be able to kind of edit some of the vendor records and so on. So there is no easy way for you to give access for QuickBooks only for purchase order process. And that is a non-starter for many finance teams. No controller wants their employees in their books. And, first of all, it's a confidentiality issue, right? You maybe don't want to open up books to all the employees. But more important, it becomes a control issue that if they mess something up, then you're back to square one, right? So that's kind of number one problem that we see with scaling QuickBooks. The second problem you see is there is no approval workflow in QuickBooks. So let's say if you want a more proactive spend control process where employees are submitting a request for purchase, it's going to go for like an approval, you're checking the budgets and things like that, and then a purchase order is issued to the vendor, you cannot do that, right? Same is with invoice. If you're just processing AP and pushing invoices through the system or the bills through the system, there is no way for you to have an approval process. Now, they recently launched approvals for invoices, which is more on the customer side, but there is nothing on the AP side. So what that means is you are creating sub-processes outside the system, which is typically emails or Slack messages and so on, and trying to kind of manage the approvals outside, which doesn't scale. Number three is how QuickBooks handle purchase orders. So there is very limited configuration that's available, first of all, on how a purchase order looks and what information you can add, especially on the QuickBooks Online side, right? There's one fixed format. And if you want to add additional information to that, it's very hard to do or not possible to do. So that means you have to take the PO outside, format it, then email it to the vendor, which makes the process very long. Now, if you were then, going back to the previous example we were talking about, if you're creating maybe 5 purchase orders a month, that is fine. But if you are, doing hundreds of purchase orders, that doesn't kind of make sense, right? And the second thing is if you are dealing with like large vendors like Amazon and all, which offers punch outs and where you can send the purchase orders electronically to the vendors, right? Like CXML and all, QuickBooks doesn't support that at all, right? So what does this mean overall? Like, due to these challenges, what we see with most companies is they cannot open QuickBooks to the end users or the employees. So what happens? Accounting system becomes the process. That means they will put in some sort of email process where somebody has to email an accountant and they will go into QuickBooks, create the purchase order, format the purchase order, then send it back to the employee then sends to the vendor and so on. And which means your accounting team is actually creating purchase orders, not managing books. And that is not best use of your time, right? All right, with that said, now let's look at what you need in a procurement software to kind of solve all these problems. And we'll go and address one at a time. So number one is you need a proactive spend control or approval process. When we think about automation, or what we see in the market is most AP teams try to approach this automation process by automating the invoicing, which means I need a system where I can upload an invoice, send it for approval, and that should sync the data back to your accounting system, in this case QuickBooks, right, whether it's online or desktop. And that approach makes sense from an AP standpoint, but by the time you receive an invoice, the spend has already happened, right? So there is no control built in for you to stop that purchasing from happening if you wanted to. So, and again, if you are probably less than 50 employees, that is not a problem because purchasing is limited to few people. But as you scale, more and more people are buying. So what you need is a proactive spend control. What I mean by proactive spend control is the ability to have a process where an employee can put in a request for what they want to purchase. You should check against your available budgets to make sure do you even have the money to make that purchase. It should be reviewed by the right people to make sure, do we really need it from an operations standpoint, right? For example, it's, beginning of the school year, for example, and you see a spike in office supplies, right? So what happened all of a sudden in the business that people are buying a lot of office supplies? Maybe, I don't know, somebody's buying and taking it home, right? Who knows? So those are the controls that you need in place as you scale so that one can check and make sure, do we really need it, right? So you need a proactive spend control process. So that's number one. The second thing you need is a buying experience that is similar to what people are used to in most cases. So what do I mean by that, right? So let's say you set up a great system or a process which is heavily form based. Somebody has to, let's say you need to buy a pencil from Amazon. I'll go to Amazon, browse it, then copy the link, put it in a form, submit the form, print it, email it, and so on. Is it a process? Yes. But is it going to scale and is your employees going to use it? No. So you need to have a process that is easy to use. Otherwise, employees will find workarounds. They will call the vendors directly. They will put that on their credit cards. You're reimbursing them again and again, right? That is a never ending and probably a non-starter for many companies. So when you're thinking about a procurement software that can work with QuickBooks, you need to have an experience which is as easy as using like Amazon, where I can just browse through what I need to buy, click few buttons, route it for approval, and you're done, right? So that is what you think about experience. Similarly for AP, you don't want a system where your AP team or accounts payable team is spending a lot of time entering data or matching the invoices, and it's not easy to figure out why a invoice is stuck in an exception or, they have to manually go and check everything. So that's the experience part. The third thing is automated invoice matching. What we see is with most companies, when they scale, right, they start putting better controls in place. One of the control is a two-way or a three-way match. And the intent is very simple. With the three-way match, you match your invoice with the goods receipt and the purchase order. And what you're trying to figure out there is, are we paying for what we actually ordered and has that been received? Those are the things that you're checking. And if there's an exception or a price difference, maybe system needs to point that out and then route it to the right person, right? So it's not just saying, hey, there's a problem, but what are you going to do about it? Who's going to resolve that exception? Is it going to be procurement? Is it going to be AP, right? Those things needs to be defined and have that kind of a hierarchy predefined so system can route it to the right person without the need for a manual intervention. Same is true for two-way match. Let's say if you purchase a service, then was the service delivered? Was it delivered at was it satisfactory, right? Should we pay the vendor? These are the questions AP cannot answer. So when the invoice comes in, it should be routed to the person who actually ordered the service. So they can come back and say, yep, this is good to pay on now, right? So that's what we mean by two-way or three-way match. And finally, you need integration with QuickBooks, right? It sounds very simple, but the devil is in the details, right? So let's look at what you need for QuickBooks integration, right? So number one is it should be able to pull your existing data from your chart of accounts, your list of suppliers, the context, your payment terms, all that. You shouldn't be manually moving the data back and forth, right, between the systems. If you are a project-based company, like construction company and all, it's important that we can get estimates, we can get the customer name, project details, all that from QuickBooks and make it available in the procurement system so that when somebody needs to buy something, they can simply select for which project they're making the purchase. So the easy to do profitability analysis and things like that. And second is the data that's created in the procurement system needs to go back to your accounting system. So whether in this case, sending let's say a purchase order to QuickBooks or sending a bill to QuickBooks or sending a receipt to QuickBooks, sending the attachments, the actual invoice copy and so on. But more important is how it is done. What you don't want is it becomes a bottleneck for your AP team, basically goes and press few buttons to move the data. The data should move automatically between these systems. So those are the four things you should look for in a procurement system. Now, let's look at how ProcureDesk helps you solve these problems, right? So we'll look into those 4 areas, and I'll kind of now walk you through each step-by-step process and how it works in ProcureDesk and how it integrates with QuickBooks. So number 1 is we talk about approval workflows, right? Or the proactive spend control. Here is how it works in ProcureDesk. It's as simple as a employee goes in, put in a request for what you're looking for. You select few fields, you tie to your budget, it do a real-time budget check to make sure that you have money available. It already knows who you are, so you're not filling a lot of form data and so on. But most important, it also knows where it needs to go for approval. So who's your manager? Okay, do I need to route IT because it's a specialized purchase, or Joe is the project manager for this project, so Joe needs to approve all that, right? All that can be managed within ProcureDesk. So that's a spend control process. You submit the request, which then goes for a manager or whomsoever needs to approve the request. They can do that from their mobile app. If they're on the field all the time, they can do that from email or log into the system or work with Slack and so on. We make it super easy for employees to submit the request. And once the request is approved, system generates the purchase order and send it automatically to the vendor. There is no manual intervention required. So if your employees are buying from Amazon, great. You just select what you want to purchase, route it for approval. Once approved, PO is issued to the vendor. So what that means for CFOs and controllers is they have proactive spend control. They have visibility in terms of your committed spend, what is being purchased. So they're not running blind on how much cash they need to run the business. They can look at their committed spend 3 months, 6 months down the line, and then figure out, your cash flow process from there. Number 2 is we talked about buying experience, right? So you want a buying experience that is easy to use for your employees. Now, how we solve this is we actually implement the same experience what they have today, right? So if you are shopping from, let's say, Amazon, you're used to going to Amazon where pick what you want to buy and then order it. We have implemented the same process in ProcureDesk where you go to Amazon, select what you want to buy. It automatically moves the data into ProcureDesk. So there's no need to copy data, copy links and things like that. It then takes that information, gets it routed for approval. And then once it's approved, Amazon is notified so that they can ship the product. It's as simple as that. And we don't do it just with Amazon. We do it with close to 300 plus vendors. So whether you're working with Staples, Grainger, CDW, you name it, we have worked with them. So that is kind of the best experience you can offer to your employees, which is don't change the current experience they have, which they are what they're experiencing on the vendor website, right? So that's the employee experience. By the way, if you're watching this and you want to see this in practice, click on the link below to schedule a time with one of our product specialists, and we'll walk you through how ProcureDesk kind of streamline your purchase requisition process, but also provide better experience to your employees. All right, so now the third piece, which is the automation or the full invoice workflow. So we talked about two-way, three-way match, and we made it super simple for your AP team to manage invoices in ProcureDesk. Whether you're dealing with an invoice that has a purchase order tied to it, or you're simply paying a utility bill which has no purchase order attached to it. We handle both scenarios. And the way it works is you already have your like an inbox maybe where you're receiving your invoices and so on. We simply connect to that inbox, pull all your invoices automatically. So there is no need for your team to download invoices, manually upload that into the system. All that is gone. Simply we'll pull all the invoices, and then we use OCR and AI to pull the data from the document. So there is no need even to do data entry in our system. It looks for who's the supplier, what's the information on the invoice number, dates, line items, pricing, taxes. It pulls everything automatically. And when you log into the system, you simply see an invoice that's already created for you. Now, once you have reviewed everything and you made sure it's great, you press one button and the system knows what to do. So it will automatically match the invoices for you with your receipts of purchase orders. For services, it will automatically route the invoice for review and approval. And if it is simply a non-payer invoice, let's say legal services, utility bills, and so on, it will route it to the right person for approval. Now, with the help of AI, you can also automate the coding process. So one of the challenges that we see with many people, many companies, is employees don't know where to code an invoice. AP team doesn't know the context of how it was purchased. So what we have done is we have an AI-based process where it looks at your past history and it learns from that. And then it automatically classifies your invoice invoice when it sees next time and say, oh, I've seen this. All right, this is how it's going to be classified. So all that is fully automated. And then if there is any exception, let's say the price is different than what was on the purchase order, or the vendor sends you an invoice for 10 widgets, but you've only received 2. System is smart enough to know those exceptions, and you can tell it upfront and say what to do. So for example, if there is a quantity exception, send to Joe in receiving because he can kind of validate why there's a difference, or if there's a price difference, send it to Shelly in procurement because she knows why the pricing is might be different, and work with the vendor to make sure that pricing is updated, right? What that means for your AP team is you don't need manual approach where you're babysitting every invoice, trying to figure out what's going on, figuring out from an approval standpoint what needs to be done, right? So that's all fully automated. And the last thing is integration, right? So with our integration, things are pretty straightforward. It's a one-click integration for QuickBooks Online. For QuickBooks Desktop, it's simply enter a few details and your integration is up and running. We automatically pull all your accounting data, chart of accounts, job project, estimates, you name it, all that automatically shows up in ProcureDesk. And when you create a purchase order or an invoice, once it is ready to be paid, we'll automatically sync it with QuickBooks. There is no need for pressing buttons, clicking exports, and things like that. System is smart enough to know when the invoice is ready to be approved. It'll automatically send it out. So we covered those 4 areas. One of the common question I get is what to expect from implementation. How long does it take? How soon we'll see the ROI and so on. So let's cover that as well. So typically when we implement ProcureDesk for our customers, it's pretty quick. We see most of our implementation between 2 to 4 weeks from the time we kick off the project. And in that 2 to 4 weeks, we do a couple of things, right? It's first of all, it's a fully done for you service. So we take care of everything, setting it up, training your employees, making sure workflows are configured. So you can be assured that you're not going to just hand it over a system and a manual and 2 hours of consulting work and saying, yeah, go figure it out. We'll make sure that the system is adopted, or we also offer you a 30-day money back guarantee, right? If that doesn't work. So for whatever reason. So we'll take care of all that. Now, in terms of the ROI that you normally see with these systems, most of our customers see those results in the 30 to 60 days. It is very common for our customers to see a reduction in their invoice cycle time by 30 to 40% on an average. Sometimes we have seen 50 to 60% as well. As they start seeing more and more data, system becomes smarter and you see more reduction in the cycle time. For example, Coast Flight saw 30% reduction in cycle time. Other aspect you're going to see is your month-end cycle time will be reduced. We typically see a 40% to 50% reduction in a month-end cycle time as a result of that, because your team is not chasing invoices. It's already in the system. You're running your accrual reports and you're spending more time on analyzing spend versus trying to figure out where is this invoice and why that was not approved. So if your company is using QuickBooks and you're dealing with surprise invoices, not able to keep up with the purchase order volume, or your accounting team is creating purchase orders, click on the link below to schedule a time with one of our product specialists. We'll walk you through exactly a step-by-step process on how we automate the entire purchasing and AP process and how the system connects with QuickBooks. Again, click on the link below to schedule a time with one of our product specialists. And if you want to know more about how to do month-end close process 3x faster, watch this video.